meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so can we see the screen and can everybody hear me? People give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great. So thanks everybody for coming out, and thanks to Luke and the other organizers for inviting me to come and speak for you. My name is Paul, and I'm from Waterloo Region Votes. Well, no, I'm from Civic Tech Waterloo, really, and we put together Waterloo Region Votes. Um, we don't have a lot of time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you a whirlwind tour. My idea is to show you a little bit about the site, also try and motivate why this site has to exist, or why we decided we wanted to make it exist, and how we decided we were going to try and make things better for municipal voters in Waterloo region. Um, so, uh, I do have some slides, but I think I'm going to try not to show them, and I'm just going to try to walk you through the site a little bit. That means that things might be a little bit more scatterbrained than usual in my presentations. So what that means is that if things are confusing to you or I'm missing something obvious, um, you're not supposed to ask questions, but you can ask clarifications in the chat. I will try and keep an eye on the chat and answer those if they're there. We can wait for longer questions till the end. So this is a version of the site. It's actually a version of the site that I pretended that the election wasn't over, so it will be the version, a version that's similar to what voters would have seen before the election was finished. And let's start by talking about Waterloo Region. So on the site, there is a map, and people are allowed to click in the map to find out which ward they're in, or they're allowed to type in their address. But just to orient us, because I know that not everybody will know where Waterloo Region was, I wouldn't have been able to put it on a map before I moved here. This is Waterloo Region as a whole, and if I zoom out, we should be able to see how it's related to Toronto and the GTA over there. So it's not too far, kind of in the middle of the deer's head there. And Waterloo Region is kind of complicated, and this is where the first part of my motivation comes from. So it is a two-tier municipality, which means that there are some area municipalities, I'll call them, and there's 7 of those in Waterloo Region. There's 3 cities. There's in the orange here, there's Waterloo. In the purple there, there's Kitchener. In the orange, there's Cambridge. And then there's 4 townships, and the townships are mostly rural. They have a few urban areas, but mostly they're rural. And so here's Woolwich in the red, here's Wellesley in the dark green, here's Wilmot in teal, and here's North Dumfries in the blue here. So there are 7 different area municipalities that make up Waterloo Region, and it's a two-tier government, which means that in addition to there being a local mayor and local councils for each of these 7, there's also a regional council. And so the regional council is made up of the 7 mayors, so there's 7 people there. There's one regional chair who's elected, and who people elect directly, so that makes 8 people. And then there's another 8 people that get added. So Waterloo gets 2 regional councillor seats, Kitchener gets 4, and then Cambridge gets 2. And so what that means is that there's 16 people in the regional council layer, plus however many people there are in somebody's local municipalities, plus, and this is the same across all of municipalities, school boards. And there's 4 different school boards. There's English and French school boards, and there's public and Catholic school boards. And so there's all those 4 combinations. And so what a voter has to do is they have to make a decision on all of those. And that's kind of complicated. So that's a lot of stuff. There's a fair amount of cognitive burden there. You have to know where you're voting and where you're going to vote. And the other aspect about municipal politics that many of you who voted in municipal elections have seen is that in addition to there being a lot of positions, so instead of just having an MPP or an MP that you vote for, there's also no political parties. So you can't just say, well, you know, I always liked the purple party, so I'm just going to vote for the purple party and then not worry about anything else. Or just, I like the purple party leader, and so I'm going to vote for the purple party leader and not vote for anything and not worry about anything else. Every single candidate is something that you might have to look for. So if we look at a couple of examples here, this is Kitchener Ward 9, and let's take Wilmot Wood for. So what does a potential voter do? So our hope was a potential voter would come to the site, they'd see the big map, they can click into the big map. There's also an address search bar that kind of works. It's a little bit flaky, but it works okay. So I could put in, and then hopefully something will complete. There, say that. No, see, it went away. You're not being very good. And then that would should zoom you to the place if it ever will let me click on it there, and that would tell you your ward there. And so when you click on one of these, when you click on the appropriate ward, then that will tell you all of the candidates that are running. So for example, in Kitchener Ward 9, there's quite a few different positions to vote for. You vote for one local area councillor, so one Kitchener councillor, Kitchener mayor, the regional chair who's elected, regional council for Kitchener, and I said there's 4 votes there, 4 seats there, so you catch 4 check marks, up to 4 check marks, and then one for this, and then some school board. Most people are in the English Public School Board, and there's four seats to fill there. If you did the math on how many candidates are actually running in these, well, you would find that there's 11 different positions to vote for, and there's 45 different candidates. So that's a lot of different selections to go through, and that's a lot of cognitive burden for people to manage. So our hope for building the site was to help people manage that a little bit better. How did we do that? Well, this is it's really the third, but let's call it the second iteration of this site because we used this in 2018 as well. And in 2018, this site was very important because there were uh, there were listings that were done by the municipalities. So, for example, here's Wilmot, and it would show all of the candidates that were running. But in 2018, they would give the name of the candidate, they would give their phone number, they would give their home address because they were crazy. But in 2018, they refused to list anybody's website. And so they wouldn't put Twitters or Facebooks, and they wouldn't put even election websites in the listings. And so people would be able to email their candidates or phone their candidates, or I guess show up to their house, but they wouldn't be able to have an easy way of getting getting to their websites. And so that was in 2018, that was a thing that we wanted to work on. In 2022, that got fixed, so that's a better thing. But one thing that we try to do that the municipal websites still don't do is kind of collect all of the information like a filter feeding sponge. Because one of the aspects of municipal politics and municipal elections is that people don't really pay attention to it to the last 2 weeks before the election often. But there's a lot of information that's kind of floating by in news articles and surveys and things like that that people that are floating on the internet, and people, if they're just looking in the last 2 weeks, they might miss that stuff. So one of our goals in this website was to catch that stuff and put it in listings so people could find it. So what does that look like? Well, so let's take regional council for Kitchener. So here you can see there's like 14 different people. Whoops, that was a bad thing to do. There's like 14 different candidates. What we do is we list their websites, we list some of their popular social medias. So that's the first thing that they can do. So somebody, if they want to do research on the election, they can go through and look through the different websites, or they can try and follow them on Twitter or whatever. But we wanted to add a little bit more information than that. What we wanted to do is we wanted to collect the information that would make it most easy for people to be able to make a decision in the election. And so we were a little bit opinionated by that. In my opinion, personally, and I don't know if everybody in Civic Tech Waterloo shares this, but I think some people do. Meeting recordings. If you can go to an all candidates meeting and spend a little bit of time there watching people answer questions, that's a really effective way of deciding who's competent for positions and who's not. Sometimes those get recorded. So we also included meeting recordings for different candidate debates that were being held. Another good way to find out who to vote for is to look at surveys. So there's a ton of special interest groups, and they all want candidates to promise things and support their positions. So they send out surveys, and they don't necessarily mean for those surveys to be viewed by the general public. But haha, we can track them down and we can record them here. And so we have a bunch of different questionnaires that we list there. There are also some endorsement lists here. So one way that voters can find out which candidates to vote for is to look for an advocacy group that shares their values, and they can see what the answers are to the questions that are being asked, and they can make their decision that way. And sometimes there's just like outright endorsement lists. So the Waterloo Regional Labor Council made an endorsement list. There's a few other, here's just a few of the candidates we support from Reallocate Waterloo Region, and they listed them there. And when they list those things, and we were catching those things and we were putting them there in the hopes that this would make it easier for voters to find information. Other things that we publish that I think would not be published on municipal sites: newspapers and news organizations made a ton of profiles and special interest stories, and so we would put those there. And also sometimes there would be like opinion pieces in Reddit or in the newspaper, and so we would publish some of those too. We didn't publish every single thing, but we tried to publish anything that was relevant. One very important principle in this site is that we were trying to be nonpartisan, or multi-partisan. So whether we personally agreed with something, with a position or not, we wanted to have it out there so that people could, who supported that particular position, could find the candidates that they that they wanted to vote for, and and they could make their decisions that way. So that was the idea behind the site. We collected this information across different councils. So for example, if you look at the Wilmot site, you could see that, they have a mayor as well. They had a little bit of a weird thing, where their township for Ward 4 actually had two people that they could vote for. So we recorded that, and then we said, for this position, you can vote for up to two people. For regional councilor, you could vote for up to four. And so the idea here was to make it not necessarily tell people who to vote for, but provide the information that people would need in order to make an informed decision. How did it work? Well, it worked. In terms of what we accomplished overall, we got some media. We got some media coverage, so we got a few newspaper articles, but most of the people who read the newspapers were already getting lots of coverage there. We got on a podcast, and we also got on morning radio, which actually really helped. We saw a big spike in our numbers of people visiting after that morning radio appearance. So I think that some people did use the information for the site to make a more informed decision. It's harder to vote in municipal elections than it is for federal or provincial elections, and certainly there's not as much. It seems like a very quiet election. One of the aspects in Waterloo Region is that we have a sign bylaw that said that you weren't allowed to put election signs on public property. You could only put them in private property, and so that made it seem much quieter than it already was. So getting the word out about the election and why it was important was something that was a challenge. It was an important election, just like many other places in Ontario. We have many of the same sorts of issues around housing prices, around homelessness. We also had a lot of empty seats. So I said that there were 16 seats on the regional council level, and out of the 8 regional council seats at large from the 3 cities, 6 of them were open. And that's a huge deal, because in municipal politics, you find that incumbencies have a huge advantage. Um, so most of the competitive races were those where there weren't incumbents. That doesn't mean that incumbents never lost. There were a few incumbents that lost their seats, but overall incumbents, it's much easier for incumbents to win. In terms of usage, well, one of the site goals was to protect privacy. So if people didn't want to be tracked, we didn't track them. Of the people that were allowed to be tracked, we had about 5,400 users in the last 2 weeks. In 2018, it was higher, but we were using a more intrusive sort of analytic system, and that was 9,000 users. We had some personal testimonials that people found it they appreciated it. Many of the candidates appreciated it. They said a few said that they were getting most of their traffic coming from our site, which was nice to see. Some people said that yes, this was a helpful resource in helping them make decision. So that's the good news. The bad news is, let's see, do I have it? Where did I put it? There. This is the bad news. Overall, and you're going to find, I think, when you invite your other the other people who've set up similar sites, it was a really disappointing turnout. Turnout went down in many, many different places. It went up in Wilmot and Woolwich. Wilmot had a competitive mayor's race, so did Woolwich. But Waterloo did as well. They didn't have an incumbent for their mayor, and they still went down. Kitchener went down dramatically. So simply having this site wasn't good enough to make people come out to vote. If you look at the site, you can see that there's a lot of stuff here, and maybe there was too much stuff here. Maybe trying for completion wasn't the right thing to do, and there might be some work that we could do on that. The site is okay; it works okay in terms of having the information and working okay in mobile and things like that. But it may be that there could be more design that could have been done there. To the extent that we were successful, why were we successful? So maybe I will go to the slides a little bit. And the overall turnout was down across the region from 25% from 31%. So that was honestly a pretty disappointing situation. Let me just see if I can find there. So thinking about what made us successful or not. So one idea was maybe we have good code. It's nice open source code. Nobody cares about the quality of your code as long as it's displaying the information. Useful information, I think, matters a little bit. If you don't have useful information, then people won't use your site. And so there was a fair amount of useful information there, but that wasn't sufficient. Usability and aesthetics really does make a difference. I wasn't very good with that, but we had another volunteer, Sharon Kennedy, who did a great job in sort of making this look okay, look at least like a 2018 site, if not a 2022 one. And a big, huge help was actually marketing. We had some press releases, and that got us press, and that got us on the radio, which helped a lot. We also had a social media campaign, which helped drive these things. So I think one of the lessons to learn is that you can write as good tech as you want, but if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to use it. Yeah. So I think that's most of what I have to say. I can take questions. I have a bunch of things around the tech stack. I have a few other thoughts about like afterwards. I mean, honestly, did we accomplish anything? I don't know if we really accomplished a lot that would have been accomplished over just the municipal web pages, but maybe we did. I can say that overall, like the provincial government, the day after the election, threw lots of things into chaos. And so for whatever good we did in terms of trying to spread awareness about the election, trying to get people to vote, lots of people didn't vote, and maybe they were right not to vote because the provincial government basically changed the rules the day after the election. And so I think a lot of people who are working to try and get out the vote and trying to promote the importance of the municipal election felt a little bit dejected because of that. It really, really drives home the idea that the municipalities are a creature of the province, and so the province can just change the rules whenever they want. And I think that both within the councils and within the candidates who are running and the people who are working to publicize things, it was that was a little bit dejecting. But that's the site. That's the overview of the site. I hope I didn't go over time too much. I'm happy to take questions if people have questions. I can take them.